72 minutes of humiliation. How Romeo turned the Chinese Z-10 into a textbook for the Pentagon. The South China Sea. The day is nearing its end. The sun glimmers on the waves, but the skies here are rarely calm. At 2:30 p.m. local time, an American MH-60R Romeo anti-submarine helicopter begins its quiet hunt. It's just lifted off from the deck of a giant, the nuclear-powered supercarrier USS Gerald R, around which the full force of the U.S. 7th Fleet maneuvers. For the crew, this is just another routine mission. They carry out dozens like it every month. But in Beijing, every move it makes is seen as a provocation, a violation, a threat. One brief order from the highest offices in the People's Republic, and within 20 minutes, a Chinese Z-10 attack helicopter is airborne. Its objective is straightforward on paper: show strength, scare off the Americans. But what's simple on paper rarely plays out that way in the sky. The MH-60R Romeo is not flown by rookies, and the aircraft itself is considered the best in its class. So instead of showcasing Chinese military power, the world witnessed a lesson, one that will cost the entire Chinese military dearly. For the crew of the MH-60R Romeo, this flight was just another watch. Their target, a Chinese Project 039 diesel-electric submarine. According to U.S. intelligence, it had already been submerged for 2 full days. That meant time was against it. Diesel-electric submarines can operate silently on battery power for no more than a couple of days, after which they must surface to breathe and recharge. To do that, they raise a snorkel, essentially a breathing tube for the submarine through which air is drawn in for the diesel engines and exhaust is released. But these are the moments when the sub is most vulnerable. The noise of the engines and the visible snorkel easily give away its position, even to an inexperienced adversary. For the Americans, this was just part of a familiar hunt. The crew documented every detail: acoustic signatures, propeller noise, sonar readings. All of it was being compiled into a dossier, an acoustic profile of the submarine, which would allow the U.S. Navy to recognize vessels of this class with ease in the future. For Beijing, however, the situation looked entirely different. In their eyes, the presence of an American helicopter in the sky wasn't routine surveillance, it was a deliberate show of power, a signal that every move China makes is being watched, like waving a red flag in front of a bull. So they scrambled the Z-10, a source of national pride, a symbol of resolve, designed with the help of Russian technology from the 1990s. The helicopter has a modern and aggressive appearance, but beyond the angular exterior are compromises: limited range, weak armor, and electronics that lag behind Western counterparts. The radio on board the Romeo crackles to life. A sharp voice comes through in English, heavily accented. "You are approaching Chinese territorial waters. Change your course immediately." The Romeo's crew remains silent. They know the closest point on the Chinese coastline is 50 nautical miles away. They're well within international airspace and have every right to be there. The Z-10 bursts out of the clouds and banks hard, cutting across the Romeo's nose at a distance of less than half a kilometer. It's a bold move, but ultimately pointless. The Americans don't even flinch. They've seen this play out dozens of times. At full speed, about 175 miles per hour, their helicopter could cover that distance in under 6 seconds. Just enough time for a quick sip of coffee, and definitely not enough to be considered a threat. The Chinese pilot is convinced he's being aggressive, certain he's making the Americans nervous. What he doesn't realize is that at that very moment, every radar frequency, every radio pulse, every beep inside his cockpit is already being absorbed by the MH-60R sensors. The Romeo's ALQ-210 electronic support suite's vacuuming up a full digital snapshot of the Z-10, recording every detail of its electronic signature. What was meant as intimidation turns into an intelligence gift. While one helicopter is busy trying to posture, the other is quietly turning it into an open book. The Chinese pilot continues his stubborn attempt to scare off the Americans. The Z-10 launches a pair of infrared flares in the Romeo's direction. But this kind of move belongs on the stage of a cheap action film. Lots of fire and smoke, but in reality, just noise. It's the aviation equivalent of a toy dog barking at a combat-trained shepherd, hoping it'll back down. The Romeo's crew responds differently. Calmly, they lower a dipping sonar array into the water. No words needed. The message is loud and clear. "We see your underwater friend, and we're still tracking him." Down below, the Chinese submarine gets the message. It realizes the game is up. In a moment of panic, it tries to dive fast, leaving periscope depth. But that decision proves fatal. The sharp maneuver causes cavitation. The metallic hull groans under the strain. American sensors capture every decibel of the sub's unique acoustic fingerprint, every tone and overtone. The sound is so loud that it lights up the sonar screens of the entire U.S. strike group. In submarine warfare, noise is a death sentence. At that moment, the Chinese sub lights up like a Christmas tree in Times Square. In actual war, it would have been destroyed within seconds, just target practice. Only 18 minutes have passed since the start of the encounter, and the Chinese pilot finally feels like he's won something, or rather, he thinks he has. His radar finally emits the long-awaited target lock signal. In his headset, a steady tone confirms it. The target is locked. He's got the Americans in his sights. For a whole second, 3 heartbeats, he basks in the triumph. But the one who laughs last, laughs loudest. The Chinese pilot laughed first. Now it's America's turn. Because the Romeo isn't alone in the sky, operating nearby is another player, the EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft. A simple switch is flipped, and its ALQ-99 electronic attack system comes online. Instantly, the Z-10's radar loses its mind. Imagine what an old TV screen looks like when you yank out the antenna. Just a blizzard of black and white static. On the Chinese pilot's display, the Romeo splits, multiplies, fragments. 12 ghost targets swirl across the screen. Some fly backward, others disappear. A few shift direction in jerky bursts. One radar contact even shows up exactly where the Z-10 itself is, as if the system has confused the target with a helicopter it's mounted on. This is no longer target lock, it's a digital hallucination. American electronic warfare doesn't just jam the signal, it makes the radar hallucinate. While the Z-10 pilot tries desperately to line up even one phantom in his crosshairs, the Americans calmly watch his confusion. For them, this is a live-fire lesson in how 1990s-era tech folds under modern electronic warfare pressure. And then, just seconds later, things go from bad to worse. The Z-10's radar warning receivers flash red, and he's been fully painted. The entire U.S. carrier strike group has turned its eyes on him. The carrier and dozens of aircraft had all at once opened their gaze, and the Chinese pilot found himself at the center of it. For him, it felt like the eye of Sauron awakening in The Lord of the Rings, an all-seeing presence that pierces to the bone and from which there's no escape. While the Z-10 struggles helplessly with phantom targets on its screen, the Americans calmly showcase what real superiority looks like. On the carrier deck, Super Hornets are already lining up for launch. One after another, they take off, not to engage, but to send a clear message. The Romeo is never alone. Behind it stands an entire fleet. The Chinese pilot sees the new contacts lighting up his threat indicators and realizes his solo act is turned into a standoff against an entire military machine. He tries switching radar frequencies, boosting signal strength, even powering the radar off and back on again. Nothing works. American electronic warfare is still miles ahead, untouchable. Inside the Romeo, everything remains calm. The officers run through their checklists, logging parameters, documenting every reaction of the Chinese aircraft. Their quiet smiles say more than words. This isn't a confrontation anymore, it's a live-fire exercise. The objective is simple: collect as much intel as possible and let the opponent burn himself out. The carrier group exerts pressure simply by existing. Every new takeoff from the deck is another warning. If we wanted to, your helicopter would be gone in seconds. Yet, the Chinese pilot refuses to back down, even when there's no way out. He tries to turn the tide with maneuvers. He throws the chopper hard left, then the other way, pulls up sharply in steep climbs. It's the aerial equivalent of a desperate boxer swinging wildly, hoping something will land. But every sudden move costs him speed and punishes the airframe. The blades hack violently through the air. The fuselage trembles. Instruments flicker with warning lights. The Z-10 is running on its last fumes, while the Romeo stays steady and composed. The Americans aren't just watching. Their sensors record every twitch of the helicopter, translating each movement into data maximum pitch angles, climb rates, structural stress limits. All of it gets logged into the onboard systems, a goldmine for engineers and military planners. These numbers will become future manuals on how to take down Chinese helicopters with surgical precision. The Romeo's infrared cameras are also hard at work. They pick up every heat signature on the Z-10 exhaust ports, overheated gearboxes, weak points in the fuselage. All of it's being archived, turning this real-world engagement into a battlefield textbook. The Chinese pilot thinks he's pressing the enemy, but in truth he's putting every vulnerability on display. Each move digs him deeper into the trap. An hour and 12 minutes have passed. For all that time, the Z-10 has been trying to prove the might of the People's Republic, while the Americans have quietly collected intelligence, saying nothing. In the cockpit of the Z-10, exhaustion and panic are setting in. Both engines are pushing above safe RPM levels. Temperatures are deep in the red. The hydraulic systems are losing pressure. The aircraft itself feels like it's resisting its own pilot, becoming heavier, harder to control. One warning light after another blinks to life. And yet, the Romeo remains as composed as ever. Its crew continues to operate in routine mode, logging parameters, recording the Z-10's heat signature, analyzing radio frequencies. Every second becomes a treasure trove for intelligence. The Americans now know how the Z-10's rotors sound under different flight modes, where its armor is weakest, where the hottest thermal spots appear, and even how its communication system is configured. For the Chinese pilot, the conclusion is obvious. He hasn't pushed the Americans back a single inch. The submarine he was sent to protect has remained under surveillance the entire time, and his own helicopters turned into a data farm, soon to be dissected by American engineers. 72 minutes. That's all it took for the pride of Chinese military aviation to become a symbol of failure. Not a show of force, but a public exposure of its vulnerabilities. Thus ended yet another episode in the never-ending standoff between China and the United States in the South China Sea. There have already been many, tense, dramatic, and dangerous, and no one knows how many more are still to come. Not in Washington, not in Beijing. But one thing is certain, give ground in the small things, and tomorrow you'll give it in the big ones. And then leadership slips away. The modern world is ruthless. It has no sympathy for the weak. Thank you for watching. We'll be glad for your like, comment, and subscription to our channel. See you soon in our next videos.